We're in a golden age for making games. There are just so many resources out there. I love the craziness of games, the industry being surrounded by product managers and artists and musicians and designers and the conflict and the contrast and all that creativity that comes in these industries. When you are a lead, you're more like a gardener and you create the right conditions for your team, you put the right plants together, you put the right nutrients in the ground, and you have to let it manifest. I think what I can do is I can connect with people well. I can get to understand what they want for their career, regardless of their job, and make sure that the opportunities and the problems they are solving is getting them closer to something they want out of their life.
How do you prepare yourself to have a hard conversation?
The thing is that you do these conversations because it is the right thing to do, not because it's easy. A hard conversation is successful if you have built a healthy relationship of trust with the person over time.
Hello, everyone. We have another exciting guest today at our Game Makers Lounge podcast. Here we have Hector, who's been a longtime friend. In fact, he was my boss on Castleville back in the day. We've stayed in touch ever since. He's someone I really respect, and he's been in the industry for a while. Hector, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Thank you, AJ. And hello, Jason.
Hello.
Yeah, of course. How to introduce myself? I've been working on games and tech for the past 20 years. I have left the games industry twice to work in different industries. One was healthcare and the other one was software consulting. Both times I really missed games. I learned a lot from those experiences, but I don't know if I'm a masochist or something, but I love the craziness of games, the industry being surrounded by product managers and artists and musicians and designers and the conflict and the contrast and all that creativity that comes in this industry is very engaging for me. It works for my brain. And I love it. I started as a programmer. I really love programming. But I also enjoyed working with people. Basically, what I tell people is that I decided to go down the lead role because I was the one who hated going to meetings the least. So out of my team of programmers, like everyone's like, meetings. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll go to that meeting and start connecting with other disciplines and helping people coordinate. And I realized I could make a career out of that. So eventually I became a director of engineering and whatnot, have helped companies go from 0 employees to dozens to hundreds, scale up both teams and technology. Have worked on the US, Canada, Europe, teams in Vietnam, etc. So really all over the place, and I'm happy to talk about whatever. I'm an open book.
You loved to go to meetings. So this is probably where you and AJ really connected.
Well, that's my life now, isn't it?
Oh, AJ is always trying to pull me into meetings. I'm like, oh no, AJ, I've got a conflict. And that conflict is working.
I mean, I don't know if I love it, but I hated going to meetings the least out of the team. Like I could see the value on that.
Totally.
And I think meetings can be terrible, but they can also be quite good if you keep them on point, useful, moving forward, etc., etc. They can be a waste of time, but they can also be a good touch point,
of course,
for coordination.
Yeah.
It's probably a good segue to start on talking about the whole IC to management transition, right? It's something you've done successfully, if I may say so. You continue to be someone who's always dabbled into technology, and yet you're a really good eng manager. So walk us through that transition at Zynga. You started at Zynga as an IC. We both worked together on Yovel, then you and Jason worked together on poker. But then you moved to, what was that moment where you're like, all right, I think I want to give this a try? And then when was the moment where you're like, yeah, I think I'm good at it?
I don't know, man. The whole I'm good at it thing keeps going back and forth. When you work as an IC and as an individual contributor and as a programmer, you get those dopamine hits from getting shit done a lot, right? Like it's cool. You're actually solving a problem, you are coding something, it is done, you can ship code.
Yeah.
The feedback loops are very cool. Mm-hmm. When you start working with people and you start working through others, those feedback loops, those endorphin hits change a lot. Basically, what I describe to people is that as an individual contributor, you are like a carpenter. You are doing something with your hands and you can be like, I made this table, I make this shelf, and it's cool. You can show your work. But when you are a lead, you're more like a gardener, and you create the right conditions for your team. You put the right plants together. You put the right nutrients in the ground, and you have to let it manifest. You cannot like rush it and things like that. So it's a very different cycle. Psychologically, you get different rewards.
Yeah.
But what I realized was I enjoyed interacting with different disciplines. I found human psychology fascinating. Like again, going from a programmer, you put a breakpoint and you can go to a stack trace. You can see the code, you can see the memory variables, you can do benchmarking on your code, etc. Like it's very easy to step through the code, see what's happening, see what's going on across with a profiler and a debugger. I wish you could put a breakpoint on someone's brain and know like what's going on in their head, like the motivators, etc. So I actually found working with people another puzzle to solve, quite interesting as well. Connecting with people the right way, helping them solve problems, navigate their career. And I think, I don't know if whether or not I'm good. I think what I can do is I can connect with people well. I can get to understand what they want for their career, regardless of their job, and make sure that the opportunities and the problems they are solving is getting them closer to something they want out of their life. Like, are you growing towards becoming who you want to become?
Yeah.
That's why I actually ended up becoming a certified coach. I took a hardcore coaching certification just to be able to help people navigate different challenges. And it has been fascinating. And I have gone through slowly less and less coding to the point that right now I wouldn't hire myself as a programmer. I'm familiar with the tools. I can use the tools. Unreal Engine. Lately, I've been playing with Godot. Like, I know how to prototype. I know how to navigate the code. We can do code reviews together, like different stacks. Understand the technology, I think, is important. But mostly, I'm there to facilitate and help people connect the dots and get shit done, basically.
I think there's a lot of value to an engineering manager who's engineered.
Yeah.
I mean, you're immediately connecting on a professional level. And then, like you said, you're quite good at connecting on a personal level as well, just a human to human level.
Yeah. No,
sorry, AJ.
No, keep going.
Made me think of some of the best compliments I have gotten from people is that it has happened more than once. A lot of people tell me that they don't believe in engineering managers, or they don't believe in those kinds of things. They're like, honestly, I have had terrible experiences with engineering managers, etc. But working with you, Hector, like you showed me what a good one looks like.
That's good.
And I felt, for the first time, I felt supported. I felt that it actually made sense. Someone was even like, you know what? I kind of want to be a manager now. Like, now that you showed me how it can be. And I was like, yes. Like, it really felt like that was the best compliment. People who were skeptical of the role, being like, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like, and this is why it's useful. Honestly, the bar is kind of very low. So it's easy to stand out. And as you're saying, Jason, being able to speak to the technology and be able to connect with people with real problems. We can talk about their code, whatever their challenges are, but then connecting them with stakeholder management and communication and all these other things, how to grow in their careers. It can be quite fun. I find it very rewarding. It's a rewarding career.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I wanna double down on this angle. You're spot on. It's the whole aspect of gaming changes rapidly. New tools come up, new things come up. You yourself are saying you're kind of now away from coding, but obviously they will never be able to remove the engineer from you. So is it a conscious effort to keep up with tech? Are you doing this in your free time? Are you doing this at your job? So what is the feedback to some of the engineering managers? Because I'll tell you what, here's my experience. A lot of times the squads feel like, oh, their boss is probably, they don't get what we are saying. And that's a signal to me where they've gone too far away from tech, where now things are not resonating. Whereas I think you've always dabbled in. So what's your secret?
I think it's a responsibility to be able to understand the tools that your team is using and to be able to understand the tech stack, all the way from teams in the deep backend all the way to the front end and whatever player experience is like. Also understanding all your stakeholders, like a product manager, their analytics frameworks, how they do A/B testing, etc. So I do make a conscious effort of being familiar with all the tools. Again, debugging, profiling. In this latest project, we were working on Unreal Engine. We went from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5. So I was doing a bunch of like tutorials, documentation, always looking into new things. The documentation is quite good. We're in a golden age for making games. There are just so many resources out there. Mm-hmm. This is the first time I worked with Unreal. It was a very pleasant experience. I have worked with JavaScript frameworks, Unity, Flash back in the day, right? And again, lately I'm being excited about Godot, which is a super fun open source game engine. So yeah, I make a conscious effort. I do it both in my free time and during work, code reviews. I will look what people are doing, profiling, debugging, etc. I feel it's necessary to understand what people are doing and why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you prepare yourself to have a hard conversation?
And this, I love it.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, I think this is part of where the coaching training and other frameworks come in. The hard conversations can be, first of all, we need to define what's hard, right? Are we talking about hard engineering problems to solve? That's easy. So I'm going to define hard conversation as a conversation that can be a little bit uncomfortable for someone.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
For example, the typical example is when you have to talk to someone who is just not meeting expectations. Yep. Someone is not doing a good job. And you have to, your responsibility as a leader is to tell them, hey, you know what? You are not meeting expectations. And because of this and this and this, and if things don't work out, we're going to have a problem, etc. Getting ready for that, it's super hard, to be honest. There is, I listened to a podcast episode from the Radical Candor.
Yeah, podcast. Kim Scott, yeah.
And Kim Scott has in that episode, talked about how after all her years in experience, VP of engineering, etc., working on all these amazing companies, before a hard conversation, she always felt a little bit bad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like a little bit sick to her stomach, a little bit uncomfortable, etc. And that's normal. It's good that it happens because that means you are human. You have empathy, you have mirror neurons. And the moment that stops, that would mean that you're probably a sociopath or a psychopath, and that would be a bad thing. So you being a little bit uncomfortable comes from a good place. The thing is that you do these conversations because it is the right thing to do, not because it's easy.
Yeah.
And the biggest, this is a bit of a cop-out, but a hard conversation is successful if you have built a healthy relationship of trust with the person over time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So by the time you have a hard conversation, the person knows that you have their best interest at heart, that you are there to help them and you want them to succeed. And that's also something that I tell people. I tell people, hey, you know what? Like, if I wanted to fire you, this conversation, I would be giving you a termination package. I want you to succeed. Like, mm-hmm. I don't want to go down that route.
Yeah.
But in order for that to happen, this and this and this has to improve. And I'm very proud of having had many of those in the past. And people even reach out to me after years of us not working together anymore. And they're like, hey, Hector, I was thinking about that time when you put me on a PIP. Mm-hmm. And you told me about these things, etc. And I really want to thank you because it really helped me. Like, I grew a lot.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I remember in previous companies, I will not name names, but there was one individual that basically everyone had written them off. They were like, okay, this is a lost case. We know we will end up letting go of this person. Hector, you need to talk to them and see, just prepare the exit, basically. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with the individual. We had a really good chat about what was going on. And they ended up kicking ass. They ended up exceeding expectations, and they were promoted a few months later. And they were doing a really good job. Sometimes people just need to feel seen.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, wow, I didn't even notice. I didn't even know people were paying attention. It's it. Like, people want to succeed. I have found like 90% of the times when I have put someone on a performance improvement plan or whatever you want to call it, the person ends up succeeding and having a great career in the company, which is cool.
Yeah.
And when the person ends up leaving, they always find a great opportunity somewhere else, and the process feels like it was fair.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it comes down to a termination, they are not surprised, and it's kind of in as best terms as possible.
I think that's a super important point, that when it comes time to make the most heavy-handed response, which is to terminate someone, that person should not be surprised. If they are surprised, then all along the way we've missed opportunities to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's why I tell people that I'm not a fan of like yearly reviews, yearly performance reviews, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And some companies do them, and I can see that as a ritual, and that's okay. But I tell people, hey, we're doing a yearly review. I'm going to like putting together all this feedback from peers or whatever. But my goal is that you have zero surprises. Like, if we're giving you any new information on this yearly review, that means we were not doing our job.
Yep.
Like, we have to create a culture of constant feedback where we can be correcting each other all the time, little by little. And I also tell people, feedback is either you want to reinforce a positive behavior, right? Something is showing up great, and you can be like, hey, Jason, I want you to know that thing you did was really well done.
Yes.
So I'm reinforcing behavior. Or I can be like, hey, dude, you know what? The way you handled that, I think that could have been better. Or this code is not great because of this, boom, boom, boom. But I never wait. You do it in the moment as soon as possible, because you need to give person the opportunity to improve.
So good,
and you don't do those shit sandwiches, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, bring it up.
Yeah, good follow up on this topic. So then talk to me about like your typical one-on-one schedule with your team. Is it, so you mentioned about you giving feedback directly. Is it where you're waiting for that one-on-one, or you're pulling someone aside and having that conversation then and there? How do you kind of manage that tactically?
Love it. Yeah, one-on-ones are an interesting one. I mean, I have been in situations where I have had way too many reports, right?
Yeah.
I worked in a company where I had more than 70 people that I had to manage. And that's crazy. You cannot really have one-on-ones with everyone.
Yeah.
So what I needed to create was a culture where if there is an issue from either way, we just don't wait.
Yeah.
So in an ideal scenario, like at Timbre Games, I have one-on-ones with everyone every 2 weeks, only half an hour. They were touch points where, for the one-on-one, I want people to understand, okay, AJ, I am creating this space for you.
Mm-hmm.
So this one-on-one is going to be successful if you make it successful.
Yep.
You have to come prepared with interesting questions. Basically, this is your time to use me as a resource to help you.
Yeah, I keep saying this, Hector, to a lot of people. Like, it's a myth that the one-on-one is not for the manager. It's time for the employee to,
the individual.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will show up completely present, and I will be taking notes of action items. I will be following up with you regarding things that we discussed on a previous one-on-one. You have to keep shared notes. Mm-hmm. It can be a shared Google Doc or whatever other platform about things that come up. But the one-on-one is basically a moment, it's a bubble outside of the project where we get to talk about you, AJ, or you, Jason, what matters to you, what you're struggling with, what's going on. You create this space with a lot of trust, a lot of dependability with the individual. I make a point that it's not a stand-up. I don't want project updates. I don't want the one-on-one for you to tell me about how the project is going or whatever, because I do join the stand-ups and I can see the code and I can see the code reviews. It's not about that. It's about you as an individual. What are you struggling with? How can I help you become better? And if I have feedback for you at any time, if I witness a behavior on a meeting or if I see something that is not quite working, I will just ping you right away and be like, hey, AJ, I need to talk to you for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're available. But I never wait for the one-on-one. And I ask people to not wait for the one-on-one either. I will always create space for them.
That is brilliant. I I do want to shift gears a little bit. Obviously, this conversation, we can keep talking about it for hours. I'm a big fan of this, but I also want to now start talking about the other side, which is you have a bunch of ICs. How do you identify the right people you want to make a tech lead or someone you want to kind of just see whether they're good at engineering management? How do you kind of dabble that aspect?
That's a very interesting topic, and it really depends on the organization. I have been on different organizations that have different avenues for what does it mean to be a lead or whatever. So I'll talk about my preferred setting. In my preferred setting, being a lead is a role, it's not a title change.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important because if I make Jason a lead for a project or whatever,
that's a mistake.
Done. But I want the individual to know, hey, I want you to try out this lead role for this. I feel you're ready. I feel you have something worth exploring here. But it's a hat that you're going to be putting on. And if it doesn't fit you, there's no shame. You stop being a lead in 6 months.
Yeah.
Give it a try. Over one-on-ones, I will give you books. There are so many amazing books about how to become a good lead, how to be good with people, etc., etc. And I want to create an environment for people that it's safe to try it, but more importantly, it's safe to roll back. If you don't like it, it's perfectly fine.
That's rare, man. What you're describing is really good. But I have, I worked at Zynga for 15 years, and I'm sure that happened there, but I definitely saw it not happen there as well, where
and it's a shame.
Some poor guy is chasing a promotion up to the point where they're just burnt out and want out.
And that's why I don't like it when becoming a lead is treated as a promotion.
Yeah.
Because then not being a lead anymore feels like a demotion.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
And for me, being a lead is just a different way to provide a service to your team.
Great. Yeah.
Like instead of coding, now you're going to stand-ups and you're talking with the product managers and you're talking with the game designers. You're being the glue. It doesn't mean that this is a promotion. It means that you are playing a different role, providing a different service to the team. And then some people love it and they want to pursue it and then they stick around. It becomes a thing in their career. They become engineering managers or whatnot. But I have worked with amazing engineering managers. Their team loved them. But after 6 months, they were like, hey, Hector, I really like this. It was cool. I learned a lot. But I really miss coding. I just want to go back to being an IC. Love it. No problem. And then we create more opportunities for people to try this out. And the lead role can be more fluid. So I actually like if you have a pod structure or an agile structure where you have different sprints or whatnot, I can allow someone in the team to, hey, you're going to be the lead of this feature. You're going to be the main point of contact. You're going to be working with the product managers, etc. You're not becoming the lead and it's a promotion or whatever, but you're leading this one thing of the game, this new release for the Halloween live ops or whatever. And then you can give it a try in a bit of a safe place. I think that's the most ideal scenario for people to work out.
Yeah.
That is absolutely brilliant.
You mentioned pods. At risk of being a little too generalized, what do you think an ideal pod size is? Or even better, what's way too big a pod and what's too small to even bother making a pod?
Love it. Well, the concept of pods is really tied to agile development and all these different structures, right? Which is fun. Going from mobile games with shorter iteration cycles and constant releases, very different to go to AAA, that you're making a game that takes 5-6 years to make. And the roadmaps are much more, even though you're working agile, it's also waterfall, so it's a mix.
Yeah.
I think a good agile team or a good pod is interdisciplinary. That's the point. I like it when it's focused on you're doing this for someone, ideally for the player, let's say. But there can be internal people working on a tool or whatever. But let's say you're working on a player experience.
Sure.
And for that player experience, I think a good size is 7 people, 12 people, up to 12 people is still quite manageable. The stand-ups are not like terribly long or whatnot. more than 12 starts to become a bit like I probably would split it.
Yeah.
So 7 is ideal, up to 12 is easy. More than that, it starts becoming a problem. And you probably need to break it up
Yeah.
For different things.
Awesome.
It's I want to now ask you about this, right? So you're also one of the few people I know who literally has worked in the US, then Mexico, then Europe, and then you're back here. How are different other cultures everywhere? And like what
Love
strategy
it.
have you had to change as an engineering manager to like deal with? By the way, there are plenty of amazing books out there as well. So you should give your
Yeah.
recommendations and we'll add them to the YouTube channel. But just from your experience, how different was it everywhere?
I was just talking about this with someone the other day, but working with people in different cultures is also fascinating. I think being part of different culture has you are loaded with different software in your brain, right? The social contracts are different. Every company has their own social contract as well, but in some cultures you need to start by approaching someone and be like, hey, how are you? How is it going? And there's just a lot of greasing until you get to the point. Right? And in some other cultures, it's like they go straight to the point, and that can feel rude.
Yeah,
And you need
I've
to
worked.
learn to navigate those things.
I've definitely worked with both teams at Zynga because we have Zynga obviously had studios all over the world.
Yeah.
And I would get placed in different studios to go help them with various things, and I can attest to exactly that.
I remember, so when I moved from San Francisco to the Netherlands, it was a huge culture change.
Yeah.
The Dutch people have a reputation for being very direct. I actually, when I moved there, the expat thingy that they give you to do, hey, welcome to the Netherlands or something, on the second page, it was like written there, like, hey, Dutch people have a reputation of being very direct. We can come across as blunt. You will always know what we're thinking, etc., etc. And once you get past like it can feel a bit brash or something, but it's also very refreshing because you're not wondering what they are thinking. They will tell you.
Yeah.
There's actually a Dutch character in the TV show Ted Lasso. One of the soccer players is from the Netherlands, and he shows up that way. And he's always like very direct, and everyone makes fun of it. But it's very refreshing. What I found interesting working on that team in the Netherlands was that we also had a team in Spain. And the team in Spain operated fundamentally different. Like way more Latin, way more casual, a bit more emotional in different ways. And it took us months of building trust and the right social contracts with each other so that trust showed up the right way.
Yeah.
Like the art director or someone could be like, oh, that doesn't look good. Or he would say like, oh, that sucks. That's not good. Because the feedback is that it's not good.
Yeah.
But the person in Spain is like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. This is terrible. And they were like making such a big deal out of it. And we just had to create bridges where people need to understand, hey, when this person says this, it's not the end of the world. They're just telling you very directly what's going on. And you need to honor everyone's culture. And you need to be very upfront about it. It's like, oh, this is how we talk. This is how we do. And honestly, a lot of people talk about team building exercises and things like that as being like bullshit corporate whatever, but they can actually be very useful.
Oh yeah. Sometimes you need to be casual as well. Like sometimes you just need to hang and play some social game or something.
Together. Get to know people as individuals and understand, oh, this is where you're coming from. This is your social contract. This is the software that you have for social interactions. And then you build interfaces. Right? It was the same when I worked with Vietnam. I was also working with a team in San Francisco and then a team in Vietnam. Fundamentally different. And it took months of building those bridges so that there was clear understandings of how to talk to each other so that things actually connect. It was fun.
I obviously didn't move to these places, but I had a similar experience that you described working with a team in Finland, which I think is probably more like your explanation of the Dutch. And then I also have worked with the teams out of UK, which is probably more like the teams in Spain.
Yeah, and more innuendos, and they talk around the thing instead of saying the thing.
but I bonded personally with the people in Finland over hockey. And that's when we
Nice.
got to, that's when it actually smooths it out. That's the team
Yeah.
bonding. And it was made even more awkward when Finland played Canada for the World Juniors. Canada
Who
won,
won?
I believe.
Canada won.
I think
Okay.
so. 1 year Finland won. I think 1 year Canada won, and
All right.
Nice.
there was much ribbing and stuff like that. So it was good. That was a good team building, thanks
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
pro
but
athletes.
basically that's building interfaces, right? Like it's basically everyone has their own API, and you need to
Yeah.
make an interface so that everyone can talk together and agree with each other.
That's exactly why they
That's
can't remove the engineer in you. You're describing like human management, and still, the engineer in you is using interfaces and APIs. I love it.
with those analogies.
We're coming towards the end here, but I do want to, breach one topic, which is, it's been a really tough time in the gaming industry, right? We're all going through a downturn. As a manager in a big game studio, there's a lot of responsibility. How do you see what is going on? What are you, telling your team? How do we all get out of this? I would just love to hear your perspective.
This is very relevant to me right now as well, because a couple of weeks ago we announced our studio closure. Like it just happens, right? This is public information. Our team ran out of funding, which can happen. We were building a big game. It was turning out very, very good. Already 2 or 3 years into development, but we still need a couple more years to finish it. That's the thing with AAA. Very big circle, like the content and everything. You build the right team to be able to make that happen, but then financial circumstances in the industry, suddenly you lose funding. And in our case, we just couldn't land another deal on time. So sadly, we had to announce the studio closure. It's one of the hardest things I have ever had to do in my career. Even though it's very common on the industry, I was lucky enough that I had never had to deal with it. I had dealt with project cancellations, but never with like full studio closure. Everyone has, myself included, everyone has to find a new job. So it's rough. At the same time, there are many interesting jobs out there. Like all the alumni group from the company, we are now on Discord connecting with each other. People are interviewing. People are already getting job offers. So just this morning, I was reading the latest report from Sensor Tower about the state of the industry and whatnot. The reality is that the industry is going back to pre-COVID numbers, pre-pandemic numbers. And we need to remember that the industry was already very healthy back then. So there was a bit of a bubble because people were spending more time playing games because they were locked at home. And now that people are no longer locked at home, they can actually go out and have more hobbies and whatnot. The industry has seen a bit of a decline, but the industry is still very healthy. So even talking about AAA, I was talking with an executive from another studio, from different publishers and whatnot. And they were like, you know what? There have been another big project cancellations, big studio shutdowns. It has been terrible. And what people is realizing is that the release roadmap for games to release in 2027, 2028 is quite empty. So
Lots of room.
now the publishers are going to be like, hey, you know what? We actually need to fund projects. And a lot of interesting opportunities will come up. So this is rough. Everyone navigates this from a different place. What I always tell people is to try to take care of themselves as humans. Understand that a business is a business, and sometimes these decisions happen, and it's not a reflection on anyone's talent. In my company, everyone was really, really good. We were really good with hiring. I would work gladly with any one of them again. But we are all losing our jobs, and it's not a reflection on anyone on the team. It's just a market.
The macroeconomics.
This is how things. But at the end of the day, there are good jobs out there. Many new companies are popping up, and I think the opportunity is there, and it will bounce back. So it's a bit about keeping the hope, keeping the optimism. And for whoever can afford it, or whoever can allow this to be a part of their life, learning to manage personal finances is a big deal. I had a I had my own company and I had my own studio, and I had to close it down. Actually, now that I remember, I guess I had tried to forget it. But in the crisis in 2009, we had the same. The publisher pulled out of the deal, and we had to close shop.
Yep.
And it was a terrible experience. Financially, I was in a very, very bad spot. And from that moment on, I decided, hey, you know what? I never want this to happen again. So I started having savings so that I always had 6 months of runway for my personal things. And I know that's a position of privilege. Not everyone can afford that. But it's important to understand, if you are going to be working on an industry that is hit driven, is the entertainment industry, a lot of ups and downs, ideally you try to create a reality where if something like this happens, you're not going to be very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell people, have a relationship with your job that is as symmetrical as possible, as healthy as possible. When the relationship with your job is very asymmetrical, meaning you need your job a lot, that just puts you in a weaker position. So if you're in a position where you have a bit of savings and you have more of a safety net, you have a healthier relationship. It's like, I'm here because I want to. If I find another better opportunity, I can go to another better opportunity, etc. But again, I don't want to minimize this. This can be quite hard for a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck, that in debt, helping their families. It's rough, but there are ways to mitigate that. Hopefully, over time, people learn to navigate it, and I think the industry is bouncing back already.
Yeah,
it's quite healthy. It just had a very bad correction from last year that we're still feeling the ripple effects.
Yep.
But I remain optimistic, and I think things will bounce back.
I do see. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's an entertainment industry, and so it grows and shrinks and grows and shrinks. And like you said, in times of like pandemics or economic downturns, people turn to entertainment. Yeah. And so then it bubbles up and then it comes down. And it's the people in the industry certainly are aware of this, I think, for the most part. And I see when these big layoffs happen or closures happen.
I think we lost Jason.
I see. Did I freeze?
Back. Yeah, you were frozen.
You were
I was just going to say, like, when these things happen, I see on socials all the time people helping people. So people that are not even involved, they might not even be hiring at their company, but they go, hey, if you've got a list, I know people that are looking.
Start connecting people like crazy.
So the industry is actually not that big in terms of you will run across the same people all the time, like you like right now. And so like it pays to be kind to each other as well.
Absolutely. And I see that in what's happening in Timbre Games, as sad as it is and quite terrible, people are helping each other so freaking much. Like I see the activity on Discord, the activity on LinkedIn, people reaching out. I've been doing mock interviews with people. Like people are like, hey, Hector, let's do a mock interview. Help me prepare for an interview. Can you review my CV, etc.? And again, people are interviewing. People have opportunities. I don't want to downplay how harsh it can be to lose your job and etc. But I also quite hopeful to see that what you're describing in terms of kindness and people supporting each other, people making games. Honestly, we are not here only for money. Like I could be making more money if I was working in a pharmaceutical, if I was working on a financial institution, etc. You're here because you are a gamer, because you love this industry. You love being surrounded by concept art and things like that. So there's a lot of empathy and understanding around that. And people coming together is one of the coolest things I have seen despite this outcome. I'm very proud of how the team is showing up and helping. Everyone is helping each other like crazy.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think like once you get into this gaming industry, it's really hard to go out because like this is exactly the kind of things you don't find elsewhere. And on that note, I think like, what you said about optimism is that's all we have to go with. But we're feeling stronger than ever that the gaming industry is going to bounce back soon. With that said, I think this has been one of the most fun episodes we've had. It's been great catching up, Hector. Thanks a lot for joining us and really appreciate our time.
Yeah, thank you both. I'm very happy to talk, and you can invite me however many times you want. We can go more in depth about any topic.
We'll take you up on that.
It was a pleasure to talk to you both.
Thank you, Hector.
All right, cheers.